Hey bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the 4 books that I read in the first half of March. I was in a really big reading mood all of March, and so I read a lot of books. So the very first book that I finished in March was a reread, and that was A Darker Shade of Magic by Victoria Schwab. At the end of February, the sequel, A Gathering of Shadows, had just come out, and Victoria Schwab had a tour stop actually not too far from me. So I was really excited to go to my first author event, and needless to say, right after that, I was really in the mood to read this series, but I definitely needed a bit of a refresher, so I decided to reread A Darker Shade of Magic. A Darker Shade of Magic is an adult high fantasy book, and it's set in this world where there are 4 different parallel universes, and each universe has its own London. Each world also has like a different amount of magic in it. One thing that's really cool is that the gray London, which has almost no magic in it, is actually our London that we have in our worlds. And the story is about Kel. So Kel can travel between these worlds because he has a special type of magic that allows him to do so. Kel also meets this girl Lila, who is a tomboy and also a thief, and she steals something from Kel, and that's kind of where the adventure starts. I read about half of it out of this physical copy, which is personalized to me, and I listened to half of it on audio. It took me a little while to get into the audiobook because I didn't really jive with the narrator right away. The voice that he used for Kel was a little bit on the older side than what I kind of had in my head for Kel. This book was just as good on reread as it was the first time around. I actually was surprised at how much of the book I had forgotten in just a year's time. I, in my head, thought that I remembered most of it. I've been daydreaming this whole year about what I thought the second book is going to be about, but turns out I didn't remember the end of A Darker Shade of Magic at all, and I'm pretty sure the second book is going to be nothing like what I had envisioned in my head before I did my reread. This book has fantastic writing, fantastic world building, great characters. I love everything about this, and I highly recommend it for anybody who's into fantasy because it's just a really great fantasy book. And I gave A Darker Shade of Magic 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of March was Afterworlds by Scott Westerfeld. This was my TBR jar pick of February. I had read the Ugly series by Scott Westerfeld a long time ago. I'm pretty sure it was the first dystopian I'd ever read, and I really love that series a lot, so I was looking forward to reading more of Scott Westerfeld. Afterworlds is actually like 2 stories in one. There's one storyline which follows an 18-year-old named Darcy. She's just graduated from high school, and during NaNoWriMo of her senior year, she wrote a book called Afterworlds, and her storyline is about her first year out of high school and her publishing journey. The second storyline of the book is the actual book that Darcy publishes, which is called Afterworlds. The story that Darcy writes is a paranormal story about this girl named Lizzie who's in high school. She has this near-death experience, and she finds out that she has a special power to travel around in this place called the Afterworld. The chapters alternate between the 2 storylines, which I found a little bit confusing at first. After getting about a quarter of the way through it, I was having a hard time keeping the 2 storylines separate and the 2 girls separate in my head, and so I went and got the audiobook for this, and I'm really glad that I did because the narrator does a really good job of voicing them in different voices. I actually thought that there were 2 narrators for this book because the voices were so different, and I was really surprised to find that it's actually just one narrator. I was a little surprised. I was more interested in Darcy's storyline, but I just found her publishing journey to be really interesting. Seeing a new writer go through the different steps in getting a book published was really interesting from that standpoint. One aspect that was really cool was to see in Darcy's storyline where she's getting feedback and needing to do like edits and rewrites of the book Afterworld, seeing the things that she talks about actually come into fruition when you read the Afterworld storyline, I thought was really cool. The characters in this book were probably the biggest downfall for me, especially Lizzie, the main character of the Afterworld storyline. I just didn't find her all that interesting. I didn't think any of her relationships were that realistic. On the other hand, Darcy's storyline, I found Darcy to be a lot more interesting. I thought Darcy's relationships with various people were a lot more realistic. And I feel like this contemporary story is more of a new adult kind of storyline because of the themes that are explored within it. It's not that there's any sexual content, because there's not, but just the themes of, moving out for the first time, learning how to deal with money and how to manage your money, and dealing with not going to college when all of your friends are going to college, and how you maintain relationships with your high school friends when you are no longer in high school. All of those things I found to be really interesting, and I definitely connected with a lot of those themes. Overall, I enjoyed the book, but I enjoyed Darcy's story a lot more than I enjoyed Lizzie's story or the Afterworlds story, which is not what I was expecting when I was going into it. I recommend this book for people who enjoy contemporary, who are interested in reading about someone's publishing journey. I think that the paranormal Afterworld story kind of helps to fill out Darcy's story, but that Darcy's story is more of the highlight of the book. Overall, I gave Afterworlds 3.5 stars. So the next book that I read in the month of March was Snow Like Ashes by Sarah Rosh. I have heard a lot about this book, and it's been on my TBR for a little while. My friend Lucy from Books with Lucy, I'll link her blog down below, wanted to read it, and so we decided to do a buddy read. Snow Like Ashes is a high fantasy book set in a world where there are 4 countries that have one season all year round. So there's spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And there's also 4 countries that have regular seasons. In this world, the country of winter has been taken over by spring. The small number of Winterians that are left have been in hiding, and one of these people is Mira, who is the main character of the story. I thought the world building was probably the coolest part about this book, and the part that I was looking forward to the most. I think it's really cool to have countries that are set in one season all year round. I also really liked the way magic is described in this book. So overall, I really enjoyed the world building. The characters, on the other hand, weren't that great for me. Mira especially kind of got on my nerves. She's one of those characters who's like super confident in herself, almost to the point where she's like overconfident, and I found her being really reckless and making reckless decisions that in the end all worked out, which I always thought was a little bit on the convenient side. I didn't love the romance that was going on in this book. There is a love triangle. The plot was really interesting, but unfortunately I kind of saw the big twist coming before it was revealed. I wasn't quite sure how they were going to pull it off, but I was definitely suspecting what happened to happen. And there were, again, just so many things that I found to be just a little bit too convenient. The predictability of the book definitely detracted from my enjoyment. Overall, I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5 stars. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is The Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I buddy read this book with Malia from Book Paradise. We wanted to read it for the Slay That Series readathon, and I just have to say that I loved this book so much. I have so many good things to say about it. So The Daughter of Smoke and Bone is about this girl named Karu who has 2 different parts of her life. She, on the one hand is an art student and lives in our world and goes to school, and then she has this secret life where she works for this chimera named Brimstone. She runs all these errands for Brimstone, and she collects teeth for him, and she doesn't know what he does with all these teeth that she collects for him. I listened to about half of this on audio while reading, about half of it physically. Kind of my new favorite thing to do if you haven't been able to tell yet. The audiobook is amazing. The narrator is fantastic. All of this book takes place outside of the US, and the narrator does a fantastic job with accents. And on top of that, she just does a really good job of having different voices for all of the characters. The narrator really brought these characters to life for me and really immersed me in this world. I definitely recommend this book on audio for people who like audiobooks, both for first-time readers and for people who want to reread it. I think the audiobook is fantastic. I love the world building. This world was really unique and not like anything that I'd read before. It is about angels, and so that's why I'm considering it to be kind of urban fantasy, but it read very much like a high fantasy to me. Laini Taylor is an amazing writer. She definitely has a way with words. Her writing's very beautiful and very quotable. beautiful. There were so many different points in this book where she just crafted these beautiful sentences that had so much meaning in them. She creates these characters that are so unique and interesting. They all have different personalities, and I really loved all of the characters. Also, the love story in this book is so amazing. I'm not someone who reads a lot of romance, and usually the romance storyline is not like my favorite part of the story. I almost think that it is my favorite part of this story. This is a forbidden romance story, so if you like forbidden romance storylines, I definitely recommend checking this out. Between Laini Taylor's writing and the characters and the romance, I definitely had lots of butterflies and my heart was fluttering, and there were some tears as well. I also really loved the plot of this story. Felt like it was really fast paced. Things were happening so quickly. It's also one of those stories where you have a lot of questions and you don't really understand what's going on. Even when I got halfway through the book, there were so many questions that I had, which a lot of times I can find really frustrating if I don't really understand what's going on in the story, but it was not like that at all in this book. Laini Taylor does a fantastic job of revealing things at just the right moment and giving you just enough information to stay interested while still being really intriguing and keeping you guessing. I highly recommend this book to people who like fantasy, urban fantasy, paranormal, whatever. I recommend this book to everybody because the writing is phenomenal, the story is fantastic, the characters are fantastic. Just, I loved everything about it. I don't have anything bad to say about this book, and everybody should just go read it right now. As you can tell, I gave Daughter of Smoke and Bone 5 out of 5 stars. If you've read any of these books and have thoughts on them, please leave them down below in the comments and we can chat about them. That's all I have for now, so thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye! Victoria Schwab was doing, oh, I forgot to say what the book is about. So that's cool. So it's about, so this story is, and her storyline is, there's spring, summer, I can't even say these, and the narrator, but I almost think that it's the favorite part of my story, but I almost think that it is the favorite part, and just the right, she gives you the, bye.